Welcome aboard Rocketship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocketship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might come across in GS paper 3. Here goes the question. Discuss the prospects of food processing industry in India. What difficulties India faces in scaling up food processing industry? We are starting with a basic definition of food processing, that is, food processing involves transforming raw food and agricultural products into consumable food. This point does not need further elaboration. With India being the second largest food producer, the opportunity presented by food processing is undeniably substantial. So much so that food processing is considered a sunrise sector. You do have the idea of what is meant by sunrise sector. These are sectors which have a great potential and which in fact have a great potential in the future. These are some of these sectors, and one of the sunrise sectors is the food processing sector. Also, with a majority of the workforce still engaged in farming, any value addition to agriculture has benefits to society going beyond purely economic. We would like to emphasize this point that if anything adds much value to the agricultural produce, either through, you could say, going for a premium offering, or for that matter adding value to the agricultural or food produce through food processing, etc., is likely to have societal value. The thing is, as many people are engaged in agriculture, and where, please try to recall that agriculture has the problem of disguised unemployment, anything that would add value to it would have positive impact on the society. It would essentially mean that the agricultural worker would have slightly better wages. They would get slightly better wages and their lifestyle would change. Aptly, the prospects of food processing are multifarious, that is, they touch upon many areas. What are the prospects of food processing area in India? Sorry. First, it is, as it is a labor intensive industry, it can generate high quality and skilled jobs. Again, the point is that India does not have dearth of jobs, rather India has dearth of quality jobs, and food processing is one of the areas which not only can produce a large number of jobs, but also these jobs are likely to be, you could say, medium or even high skilled jobs. And as these are medium skilled or high skilled jobs, they would essentially fetch the worker, you could say, much more lucrative wage than he is getting now. Large export potential, again, you can understand very well, as our domestic scale is huge, essentially due to our large population, we would have some competitive advantage due to our large scale in the global market. It can help us tackle the high level of food wastage. Again, the point is, for a country where a large number of people are still starving, as we know through the example of the malnutrition level in India, please recall that in the 0 to 5 age group of children, almost a third had some form of malnutrition. We would try again, repeat it, in the 0 to 5 years age group of children, almost a third had some form of malnutrition. And in a country where people are starving, where children are malnutrition, this large amount of food wastage cannot be justified. It's not morally justified. Industrialization of the poor hinterland, again, this point is quite straightforward, as very few other industries would be willing to set shop in the hinterland, that is, the places which are away from the coast, while the food processing industry is best suited for the hinterland, because they can actually supply the raw material required by the food processing industry, because they have agriculturally rich land. It suits new lifestyle. Again, this point is also important, that it's fortunate in fact that the lifestyle preferences are changing. People are more into fast paced life. They are willing to pay for convenience, and in fact eating out etc. too are increasing. As you probably understand that nowadays with commerce, e-commerce etc., all these things are actually coming into the onto the scene, and all of these things mean that food processing would have slightly better prospects. Moreover, the food processing industry has greater economic vitality than agriculture, which we would see through the example of its far better growth rate than agriculture. Elaborating on these points, as per an NSSO survey, more than 5 million persons are employed in food processing. This is an important data point. Please try to note it down separately. As we have almost always reminded you that you are supposed to note down the important data points separately in a separate running note. As per an NSSO survey, more than 5 million persons are employed in food processing, vouching for the potential of engaging large number of workers in semi-skilled and skilled employment. India can leverage its domestic scale to cater to global food market. Agriculture exports already bring almost $50 billion. Food processing can build on this momentum. The point is, as this industry, the food processing industry, can cater to the export market, it would have, you could say, multifarious benefits for India. For an example, it can not only bring the precious forex, moreover it would also help our balance of trade situation, the balance of payment situation as well. Now, in a country where starvation persists, where malnutrition persists, 8% of agricultural produce goes waste. This is another piece of important data, that 8% of our agricultural produce goes waste. Food processing can help cut this unjustifiable loss. This is actually a moral critique of our system, that in a country where some people, even if we are not going into the number of the people, even if some people were starving, we cannot justify the food wastage through wastage of agricultural produce and all. Few other industries are more suitable to the non-coastal hinterland as food processing. It will also help with issues like rural migration that bring their own challenges. Please try to appreciate this point, that any industry that sets shop in hinterland would help in ways more than economic. Because, for an example, if a food processing unit were to be set up in one of the hinterland areas, it would mean that the rural worker would have much need to migrate to the cities. And while we do understand our cities are already chock-a-block with people, our cities are already crowded, which is putting pressure on the city infrastructure, and that is often leading to, you could say, deterioration of the quality of life of the urban dweller. So these food processing industries setting shop in the rural areas would reduce this rural to urban distress migration, and that would turn reduce the burden on our cities. With fast-paced life, rising incomes, and developments like e-commerce and quick commerce, food processing may be at the right inflection point to exploit the opportunities created. Again, this point does not need much explanation. The food processing sector has grown at twice the rate compared to agriculture in GVA. Actually, by some estimates, the food processing sector has been growing at a rate higher than 8% per year, while agriculture hardly clocks more than 4%. So essentially, the food processing industry has greater vitality than the agriculture sector. That is why it should be actually used to, for example, for other, you could say, other points on the agenda of the government, including this can come handy in goals like doubling farmers' income, or like rather augmenting the farmers' income. With all these potential benefits of food processing, schemes like Mega Food Park, some of the schemes that the government has brought targeting the food processing industry is the Mega Food Park scheme, PMFME, that is PM formalization of micro food processing enterprises. PMFME stands for PM formalization of micro food processing enterprises. Again, this scheme does not need much explanation. These have been formulated. However, a few challenges need to be dealt with before we essentially go for scaling up food processing industry. What are the challenges in scaling up food processing? First are low phytosanitary standards. Basically, it is talking about bad food hygiene. How shoddily we handle our food, we would see later. There are some supply chain issues like an underdeveloped logistics, cold storage, warehousing, etc. Our entire logistics system remains underdeveloped. What it would mean that it would add to the cost of the food processing businessman, and essentially it would actually deduct from his margins, making it unviable for him to like operate. The agriculture market remains closed due to requirements like you, as you probably know, APMC, Agriculture Products Marketing Committee. Essentially, these are essentially APMC Act, state specific APMC Act. What essentially means that the state and in fact the international, you could say national governments too, are loath to open up their agriculture markets for exports. This has been the case in India too, where you probably understand through the great, you could say, commotion over the farmers law, that the no one is willing to open the agriculture market due to their, you could say, the various disruptions they would cause to their, you could say, indigenous or like the domestic farmers. Consumer preferences for fresh food. We have argued that the preferences are changing, but still India remains a fresh food nation where most people still prefer fresh food over the processed food, the packaged food, etc. All of this reduces the potential of food processing industry. Now, elaborating on these points, our trade partners have complained against our low phytosanitary hygiene, etc., with cases of microbial contamination, chemical residues, etc. You might recall that a few years ago, European Union had banned the import of mangoes from India because the mango shipment from India was infested with fruit fly. We would repeat it, because the mango shipment from India was infested with fruit fly. European Union had banned the import of mangoes from India. This is virtually the same story about all kinds of the food or agricultural export from India, that we are not known for keeping the best hygiene in relation to food. Moreover, talking of chemical residues, there was a similar, you could say, case where some countries had banned the import of shrimps from India because the shrimp that was being shipped out of India was found to have pesticide residue. We would repeat it, that the shrimp that was being exported from India to those countries was found to have pesticide residues. That is why these countries had banned this import from India, shrimp import from India. The underdeveloped logistics and supply chain makes it prohibitively costly to operate on positive margins. All of these lead to various forms of inefficiencies which actually reduce the potential of the food processing industry. Indians still prefer fresh food. Initiatives like dried onions have failed to take off. This limits food processing. Actually, this is a slightly comical situation where a few years ago it was planned to, you could say, dry up and store onions so that we could actually supply it to the consumer in the non-harvest season when the prices are actually elevated. You would repeat it, it was planned to supply dried up onion to the consumer during the non-harvest season where the prices are up, but the consumers far and wide, they rejected these dried up onions because Indians palate is suited to the pungent taste of the fresh onion. So the point is, Indians remain, they have actually kept their preference for fresh food. All of this would mean that the food processing industry would have to think of some other ways to popularize itself. However, we must end up on a positive note and talk about the government schemes like food park scheme, mega food park scheme, PMFME, or for that matter, performance linked incentives, all of which are meant to help India realize the potential, the prospects of the food processing industry, which we have seen has potential prospects going beyond the purely economic. It has benefits for, you could say, our trade balance, the societal benefits like better employment, better job skills, and moreover, it can also help in industrializing the hinterland. So, this was all for today. We would bring you another lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.